everyone, welcome to Computer Science, the podcast where we connect ambitious and driven girls to successful women in the STEM fields. So today we have a very special guest with us. I'm honored to welcome Ralitsa Hovanessian. Ralitsa is currently studying electrical and computer engineering at Princeton, and we're so excited to have her here today. So Ralitsa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I am a computer engineering and electrical engineering major at Princeton, which at Princeton is actually one major because they love to have a more broad education. And I'm currently thinking of pursuing a quantitative economics minor. But yeah, so excited to be here.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit more about your work and if you're in any current internships and just what you're studying at Princeton this year?
Yeah, so far I have done a lot of work across fields of biotechnology, in computer engineering, and in electrical, so I've kind of had a pretty broad experience so far. I've done a lot of research with how to improve healthcare systems globally through my environmental and electrical and computer engineering interests. And right now I'm working on more of my economics interest, so I'm currently having an internship as a pretty broad intern at Aviato, which is a private market analysis company and startup. And so that's currently what I'm working on. Also, I'm currently working on making a platform that will help improve global access to healthcare through connecting people who are in need with systems of healthcare that are accessible and in-house and without the need for infrastructure in those areas. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that engineering can be applied to any field out there. So how did you get started with electrical and computer engineering? Like, what made you want to pursue a STEM field?
Yeah, so I've kind of always been interested in math. When I was little, my dad and my mom would really focus on learning math because math truly is kind of the basis of everything. And so I've been pretty much a STEM girl since the beginning. Specifically for electrical and computer, I just find like physics and math and the interactions that they have together in the space of like the internet and computers and things like that really fascinating. Electrical specifically has a lot to do with physics, such as the chips, autonomous systems, things like that. And the computer engineering is kind of the more relevant side of that. It's very relevant to today's development of the world where AI and really technology overall is kind of the lead. And so I have pretty much, like I said, like always wanted to pursue a STEM field, but I kind of got drawn to that through my development of my interests in high school and kind of the foundation I built throughout my whole life.
Yeah, so what qualities do you think are truly important to achieve success in the STEM fields? Like you said, math and physics are a huge part and they require a lot of rigor to kind of stick with and master, right? So what are the specific qualities you think help?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing for exploring the STEM fields and having success in the STEM fields is really just being super persistent. Obviously, there is going to be difficulties. You're going to hit, and like I said, math and physics are both hard fields. Like all STEM fields are pretty difficult in general. But if you're really persistent and you know that you can do it, because success, anybody can be successful in STEM. If you believe in yourself, you can really truly find success. Another quality that I think is super important is the ability to be very collaborative. In pursuing a STEM field, some people do take the more independent route, and that is 100% like, wow, like I'm super impressed. That I like find really important to my personal success is being able to work with others and kind of like sharing my experiences with things that I find difficult, and other people may find those subjects easier and they have advice to give me. So like this kind of collaborative nature is a very important quality to have, to be able to like go out and like communicate what you're struggling with, what you want to work on, things like that. And then you can very easily find like whole like communities of people who are interested in those things and can kind of help you lead to that success.
Yeah, collaboration can really help navigate the ups and downs. So, with any amount of success, failure is bound to come. Can you tell us a time where you faced an obstacle or hurdle in your journey and how you overcame that?
Yeah, so a kind of like example during my senior year, we were working on a project where we were creating a bottle opener for an elderly woman in our community named Xian Yang. And in theory, a bottle opener, it can Xian Yang needed a bottle opener because she had a stroke and she had paralysis on her left side. and so she wasn't very strong in her left side, and she couldn't open things like pill bottles, water bottles, all those types of like vital needs that she needed, especially because she had a stroke and she still have side effects. Also like, food, things like that. And so we were creating this bottle opener, and one of the things we wanted the bottle opener to do was we wanted it to be adjustable for anybody, so like any type of strength and for any type of bottle. And one of the things that we found was that no matter, like, we made so many different prototypes, and it was just every single prototype, seeing Yang just like she couldn't use it, she wasn't strong enough to use it. And this was kind of like very difficult, because we were making a product for this specific person to use and to improve her life, and it just kept not working. And we knew like every day that we didn't create this product was another day that she had to live in like a state of dependency on those around her. She couldn't open a pill bottle, so she had to go to her daughter or her granddaughter or something like that, or her grandson, my friend Nathan, to address those needs. And so finally, after a ton of work, we finally did manage to make a bottle opener that both did not slide. So one of the issues was that she was twisting it and then it would slide because of the friction coefficient. And so we made it so it didn't slide, it did work. And she was so happy that it worked finally, and it was compatible with both water bottles and pill bottles and everything. And then we ended up writing a paper about it. So really the thing that we had to focus on in that process was seeking this like constant motivation by understanding what our purpose was, centering back on like we want to help this person, we can't give up because this product can really change somebody's life, not just her, but stroke survivors in general, or people who suffer with paralysis in general. And so that was kind of very motivating to keep going forward. And also we always came together as a team, and we talked about what wasn't working, what we could improve, and then we would do it again. And kind of that process of like talking to others and like really staying strong as a team really helped us overcome that as well.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I know when you're emotionally attached to something or someone, it's even harder when your plans don't go right. But I'm so glad you found a way. So next, with the busy life that you lead, how do you manage your time between university, your work, and your social life?
Yeah, so throughout like high school and obviously as I'm going to university, one of the things that people around me were kind of always baffled by was like they were like, Phyllis, like, how do you have time for everything? And really, obviously, I don't have time for everything. I can't really explore everything that I want to explore. I can't pursue every path that I do. But one of the things that really helps me manage my time is prioritizing what's important for me every single day when I wake up. Sometimes I actually have this list on the lock screen of my phone. I write down kind of what I want to achieve for the day, and I know that by the end of the day, I can do whatever I want really, but those things have to get done. And so by setting these not as like, I don't think of these things as like, oh, these are possibly things that I could get done, like, oh, maybe I won't get them done, but I set my mind that I will get them done. And by setting your mind on like, you know that you're going to get them done, and you have to get them done, kind of everything else, you find time to do the rest of the things that aren't as important, but at the end of the day, you always end up like finishing your assignments or things like that. And obviously I have to see my friends. I love having a social life. And so kind of sometimes when that is a priority for me, that one of those tasks that I have in the morning will be, spend 2 hours with my friends. And that's like something that I have to find time for because I've decided that I will be doing it. And by like having to spend time, for example, on my phone, I don't really spend time that much on my phone because that is not super productive, but not using that much time to think like, oh, like what will I do today? How can I manage all of this? Things like that. By making that schedule, it really helps me, manage my time. And I really encourage like anybody to just like plan out kind of a general scope for what their day will look like, and then it just goes so much smoother.
Yeah, I love how you plan out, like, you incorporate time for your social life into your to-do list. That probably streamlines everything and makes sure that you have time for your work and other things. So that's a good tip. Can you tell us about some of the internships that you've had throughout high school and early college? What were the things keeping you busy?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I was pretty busy actually all the time. One of the things that I really liked to work on was my work for Operation Smile. Operation Smile is a nonprofit that works with students and just individuals in general who have cleft palate or cleft conditions. And so it provides them with basically like free surgeries And on the student side, I worked on the state student board for Virginia. And so we raised a bunch of money, we spoke at different places, things like that. We went out into our community and we volunteered and did like grocery runs for people who couldn't afford to get like a healthy meal. And all of that was really like a very important part of my high school experience. I really enjoyed doing that, and so that kind of inspired my work further. I did a little bit of research where I worked on optimizing cancer prognosis with machine learning, and I used R for the first time, which is statistical, like a language for studying in computer science. And that was kind of my first experience in computer science, and I found it really, really like fascinating how computer science can make such an impact on like healthcare and things like that. And then after that, I worked a lot on in my local community kind of movements for like math tutoring and like education in mathematics and physics. At my school, I started our very first physics club, and we did physics, and we tried to make physics fun because I noticed that physics is like very scary to a lot of high schoolers. But yeah, I also, this is not exactly an internship, but one of my favorite things that I did in high school was I learned how to fly a glider. And a glider is basically a plane without an engine. And so after that, I realized that like getting into flying is super, super difficult because there's just like not that many resources that are free. They're like thousands of dollars to learn how to fly. And so I built like a curriculum that people can follow and like learn how to get their private pilot's license, both for engined planes, like small tow planes and things, and gliders. So that was kind of like my favorite things that I did in high school.
Wow, that's so cool. So you flew a plane in high school. That's amazing. And then I love your work with Operation Smile. That's so heartwarming that you were doing all that. So I also know that you were heavily involved with research, as you touched on. So I know you were a 2-time NASA research intern and then a World Science Scholar. So could you talk a little bit more about those experiences?
Yeah, for sure. So World Science Scholars, I really recommend it to pretty much anybody who's interested in science, obviously World Science Scholars, but also like fields like math, and just research in general. The World Science Scholars is led by these amazing folks at Columbia University, and basically they get like really, really, really knowledgeable people to come in and give classes that are like a month and a half long that really dive deep into subjects. Like one of it, we built like our own like business that was really, really fascinating. One of them, we learned about the neurology behind like how childhood trauma leads to like behavioral effects in adulthood. There was one on how like physics warps systems. They were all very, very fascinating. And so those experiences were super fun. And at the end of the year, especially for World Science Scholars, we went to New York and we had kind of like a festival, and we got to listen to a bunch of talks, and then we got to talk ourselves with a lot of the professionals that we had worked on classes with throughout the year, like virtually. And that experience was super awesome. I made a lot of really good friends through it. And then for the NASA part, both of them were, both the internship things started as through programs, and I did VASTS, which is Virginia Aerospace Science and Technology Scholars, and it is a Virginia program. And then I also did Virginia Space Coast Scholars, and both of them focused on mission design. I specifically worked on human factors in mission design, and for example, we created radiation shielding systems for astronauts, or we created like different Martian bases that will prevent from things like radiation poisoning and will allow people to breathe on Mars. And so we got to really work with like experts in like the NASA centers, like in Langley and in Wallops, to learn about like what they do day to day, and then also like really be building these amazing missions. And then one of the things that I loved about the programs was that they encourage you to go network with people. And so I really just talked to people who were working in human factors and did really interesting work. And so I talked to them and I was like, hey, like if you ever need somebody, I would love to work with you in your lab or whatever you're working. And so that's kind of how I got my internships past that. And then also I was selected as a NASA ambassador for my kind of region, and so I went into elementary schools and I taught very basic like aerospace lessons and things like that, and also like lessons on how to do research. And those were all really, really fun activities. So yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. So you worked for a mission at Mars, and like when you're going to Mars, how to do the food aspect. That's really cool. And I love how you said networking. I do believe networking is so important. And it's really cool how you got to further your internship through that. So that's awesome. Lastly, uh, what's actually this is second last? What's an experience from your early career that has defined you?
Yeah, that's like a little bit of a difficult question. I feel like there's been like so many that have kind of been very shaping. But I would say one of the things that has defined me was, like I talked about earlier, we made like a bottle opener for Seeing Yang, and we also did like a cart system. We worked on that. And so we worked on it with MIT Beaverworks, and so they gave us kind of the funding to work on all of that. And then afterward, we wrote a paper on it, and we presented it at an MIT conference called MIT URTC, or the Undergraduate Research and Technology Conference. That whole experience was super fascinating, especially because I kind of got to live like the experience of being like a professional researcher. I got to give, a presentation on my own research. I got to talk to people who were doing super fascinating research. One of them actually was just one of the kids I talked to discovered like 10 moons for like different planets and he was presenting it, and he was in high school, and I was like, wow, like this is incredible.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
exactly. And then I got to talk to like the founder of ChatGPT. Like I was like baffled, but that was just so defining because it showed me just how much opportunity there is in STEM, and just kind of like what if I keep following my passions in this way, like what it will result to. And I loved what the results were.
Wow, meeting the founder of ChatGPT, that must have been quite the experience. Lastly, what advice would you have for aspiring girls in the STEM fields?
Yeah, sometimes being a girl in STEM, especially if it's like a field that there's just not that many girls in, for example, physics, is always super scary at the beginning. I was like one of like 3 girls in like that was taking a physics class at my school, in like the physics class I was in. And when you're surrounded by like people who they're not really expecting to see like that many girls in that field, and they're like, sometimes they underestimate you, and they think like, oh, like she's like a girl, like she's interested in physics, but I'm just better. I don't know, that's like apparently what some people think. That's kind of what I've come across, and I'm shocked that in this day and age people still think like that. But have no fear, they are not like, just because somebody is different from you, that doesn't mean that they're superior or they're inferior in some way. They're just different. And so as a girl, kind of understanding that like you belong in the spaces that you are in. There's no space that you cannot be in just because other people like aren't leading that way. Like other people, like your friends, for example, maybe they're not interested in things you're interested in, but that doesn't mean that your interests are not valid. So yeah, just like when you're going forth in whatever STEM field, believe in yourself and understand that you might be the first person doing this, you might be a trailblazer in this, but that doesn't mean that the path that you're going through or like going in is a bad one. Rather, if you're a trailblazer, that's amazing. And I'm so proud of everybody who keeps doing like these incredible things, whether you're in STEM or not.
Yeah, I love how you phrase the imposter syndrome. So thank you for highlighting that. I think a lot of girls do feel that, but like you said, have no fear. So that's amazing. Well, Ralitsa, thank you so much for showing us your authentic self and giving us such lovely tips and anecdotes today. It was so fun having you on Computer Science.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.